to our presentation from the Connecticut School Finance Project, School Finance 101. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Ruby, who has known Erica for quite a while, and to introduce Erica Haynes from Connecticut School Finance Project, and we will get on with our presentation this evening.
Hi, I echo thank you for coming. Actually, I don't know Erica that well, but I know the woman that Erica works for, who's Katie Roy, and I met her in 2012, and I've worked with her in a couple different districts. She was originally the Chief Operating Officer for the Connecticut Council for Education Reform, and they did a lot of really good work with school districts, which is how I met her. And then she founded the Connecticut School Finance Project, which is now the School and State Finance Project, in 2015. And she's an attorney, and she's dedicated her work, her professional work, to going around the state and supporting school districts in trying to straighten out some of the financial dilemmas that they find themselves in due to funding and expenses and imbalances in the way their districts can afford to do the job that they need to do. And so Erica, who came with in very high regard from Katie, who I have a lot of respect for, is in charge of community relationships and community partnerships. And so I was talking to Katie, and serendipitously, Katie had said that she had been working with some people in Brookfield, and she was trying to arrange a meeting here. And I said, oh, well, we'd be happy to sponsor, but we don't want to step on anybody's toes. And she said, oh, that's good to know, I'll let you know. And then she connected me with Erica, and a couple days later, they contacted me and said, do you really want to sponsor this? Because we're having difficulty finding dates, and maybe, you can do that. And so we welcomed them with open arms. And tonight, Erica is going to try to help us all come to a deeper understanding of what I think some may think is a really easy and superficial kind of thing. Oh, it's just a budget. But it's really one of the more complicated aspects of the work that we do in trying to deliver a quality education to our students, each and every one of them. So I'm just going to turn this over to Erica, and thank you.
Thank you. So the first thing is, can you hear me without the mic? Yes. Then I'm going to put the mic aside. Seems like a little more comfortable because we're having a discussion here, right? So let me tell you a little bit about me first. I live on the other side of the state in northeastern Connecticut in Willimantic. I have 4 kids, 25, 21, 2 weeks shy of 11, and I have a 14-year-old. So 3 girls and a boy who just got a remarkable haircut tonight. I'm a little afraid to go home. He bought about 4 inches of height, so I'm not sure what to do with that. And I joined the School Finance Project back in 2016. My background, aside from really being concerned about education for not just my kids, but kids across the state of Connecticut. I was also a professor up at the University of Hartford at the Hart School of Music. I like teaching, so that's what gets me in front of you here. I've been working with folks in Brookfield for about a year now, talking about what school finance is and how does it translate in Brookfield. And for them, it was really important that there are more learning opportunities for folks. So this is a lot of information. I tell folks usually at the end of the night, you will feel like a jet engine took off in front of your face, and that is how I know I did a great job. It's the start of a conversation. This is not one night and we're all knowledgeable and we have all the answers. But hopefully this starts equipping you to have really great dialogue in the community. That's the intention. And to work from sets of data and facts, and to be able to ask questions, looking at the community budget, looking at the state budget in a way that is relevant to you. So let's get it started. I will take periodic breaks and ask if there are questions. It's a small group in here tonight, so don't be afraid to stop me and ask questions. A lot of times, I may tell you we will get to that in 5 or 10 slides. You'll be ahead of me for a little bit, but we'll get there, and this is a conversation. All right? Away we go. So you have both a packet with all of this information, and my card is in there. If you have questions, always feel free to reach out. You can text me, email me, or call me. I'm least likely to answer the phone. Text and stuff I can do even in meetings, so feel free though. So we started in 2015, and really we started in 2015 with a focus on how does school finance work? You know, I told you my oldest is 25. School finance was not transparent, even back in 2015, which isn't too far back. And really the intention was people really need to understand how school finance works so that there really can be community level dialogue around budgets. And so transparency and equity were some of the cornerstones that we were founded under. We rebranded in December of 2019 because we also work on issues of state finance. And really, we have to talk about the state finance picture if we're going to understand the environment that school finance lives within. So we are not a member organization. We're nonpartisan. We're a project of TS&E Mission Works up in Boston, which houses around 40 social justice projects around the country. Our goals, you'll see, that are essentially to focus on providing information and creating some transparency, serving as a trusted independent source of information and research, increasing awareness and building public knowledge. I do this in about 50 different communities right now that I'm active in across the state. So going out and just enhancing awareness and opportunities for everyone, improving transparency around both school and state finance, working collaboratively with other organizations, both in the state and across the country, to identify best practices and thoughtful solutions that can make a difference here, and providing technical assistance to those who reach out to us. We do data and analysis. We write policy briefs and do research. We do these types of presentations. If tonight you see this and you're like, this is great, but I really want to know how New London works, I'd be happy to share that, and we have that information on our website. So really just giving you an environment of context. And our goal is to support all students and public schools. We won't weigh in on local education issues. So in looking at a budget at a community level, I'll never tell you, wow, I can't believe you're spending this much, or I can't believe you're not spending more than this. Those are judgment issues that are about your community, and I don't live here. So we give you the tools to have the conversation, but we won't weigh in. We won't endorse or support local initiatives. We don't support candidates running for office. And if you ask me to provide the data that is the smoking gun for whatever you are trying to provide, we will definitely not be able to do that. So we're going to start briefly with just a state of the state. Where are we in this? So, this is pretty remarkable. This is a look at our general fund for the state of Connecticut. What's the money that we have as a state to work with? What's important is you're seeing two sides of this. Fixed costs, those costs that we cannot mitigate or ameliorate, those are costs that we have to pay. We are committed to paying. And then what they call discretionary, I prefer the term non-fixed costs, right? Education is not discretionary, but it is a non-fixed cost. So why this is important is because in Connecticut in the past year, the fixed costs have grown to over 50% of our budget. So this is the first time. And really what you're seeing on that side are the costs of bonds coming due, the teacher's retirement system, state employee retirement system, and post-employment benefits, as well as Medicare in there. So when we drill down on the non-fixed cost side, I'm just going to dance up here for you for a minute. This is education. So of that 49 or so percent of the general fund, what you're looking at is where does the money go? Education, museums, and libraries is almost 40%. Of that, really, education is 30%, and museums and libraries are about 9%. So when people, and I point this out because it's an interesting predicament, right? Everybody tells me, I don't care what they do as long as they don't touch education. But education is a huge chunk of the non-fixed state budget. And I just point that out to contextualize it as we go forward. If we were to break down that 30% and go a little bit deeper, what you're seeing here, this huge blue wedge, 64%, is the education cost sharing and alliance grants. Those are the grants that go to traditional public school districts, Brookfield, Danbury Public Schools, my home district. And then you'll see smaller wedges here for school building projects. Magnet schools take up 10% of our education spending, and it slides much smaller quite quickly. So the question is, how does this impact school finance? I'm going to tell you that from our perspective in school finance, what happens too quickly is we get lost in numbers, we get lost in abbreviations. Pretty soon we're talking about 0.4 FTEs, and really what we're talking about is kids, schools, and communities. And it's important to keep it in mind because in a finance discussion, it tends to be the first thing lost. So we're going to talk about Lindsay because we are going to talk through a child's experience. But I want to first just touch on what we're talking about when we're talking about per pupil expenses. So in Connecticut, for a long time, school districts reported at the district level. So there was a law that was passed years ago saying you have to report at the per school level. The federal Every Student Succeeds Act now requires that, and Connecticut has moved to reporting spending at the per school level. We just have the first year of data coming back from that. But the reality is we're going to use an average number, a district average number, and districts don't send out resources to schools exactly equally. So keep that in mind. So here's Lindsay. She's an 8th grader. When she grows up, she wants to become a lawyer. My 8th grader has no idea what she wants to do. She wanted to be a hairdresser one day. We moved to artist, and then she also wanted to be a solar engineer. So I think she'll be a solar engineer with good hair. So the question is really, how much does Lindsay's district get? It depends. It depends on where she goes to school. And we're going to start with Brookfield. So in Brookfield, the state contribution per pupil is $712. And I'm going to point out, though, right here, that as we get to this, you're going to see two different data sets here. This first one, and these numbers that we're going to spend time in these next few slides, are data sets from 2016-2017. The reason for that is that at this point in time, Connecticut has not yet broken down the new reporting method by source. So when we look at the dollars per pupil, currently for new numbers, we can't see what amount comes from the state, what amount comes from a local contribution, and what amount comes from federal or philanthropic sources. So you'll see two data points. These are older data numbers, but I will say that when we looked at it proportionately, everything went up proportionately exactly the same. So you could say by percentage that this is still consistent. So if you look at it, the state is giving $712 per pupil. In Brookfield, you're contributing $13,565, and your other contributions are federal and philanthropic dollars. So if the district gets a grant, and federal dollars can include IDEA, special education dollars. Typically, federal dollars are pretty clear on what they can and cannot be used for. For a total of $14,524. Like I said, slide 40 or so, you'll see the newest numbers that were just released recently. If we are to compare, and we're looking at Brookfield, and we're looking at comparable districts that we've pulled aside are Newtown and New Fairfield. When we look at those, the state contribution goes to $1,407 in Newtown, $1,870 in New Fairfield. Town contribution, compared to Brookfield, $13,565. Newtown is at $14,631 per pupil, and New Fairfield is almost identical to Brookfield at $13,557. And so you'll also notice that variance on the bottom line of those federal and philanthropic dollars going from $247 in Brookfield to $513 in Newtown and $560 in New Fairfield. So really, that must be what you're asking as you look at that, right? It's like, so that's great, and you kind of told us what we had a hunch, we already knew. So our real question, Erica, is why? We're going to go through a journey here to the why. First of all, you guys are going to have to, let's see if I can calibrate it. No, you might just have to bear with me on the head chopped off on the slides. Funding sources in Connecticut. The huge blue wedge, so first of all, $11.1 billion are spent annually on education in Connecticut. Of that big blue chunk, $6.39 billion, that is local sources. That is municipalities just like Brookfield deciding what they want to allocate to education. That tiny green bar at the top, things that you won't typically hear as I minimize almost $500 million is federal dollars in Connecticut are less than $500 million of an $11.1 billion education spending. State wealth matters for federal allocation of dollars. So we're a relatively wealthy state. So we get not a lot in federal dollars, and the red, $4.21 billion, one decision-making body, the state legislature, those are state dollars being dispersed to education. So I will tell you that we come at this from an equity perspective. And I think it's important to talk about equity in two ways. There's equity when we talk about students. There's also the matter of equity when it comes to our communities, right? Connecticut has how many different municipalities? There's a quiz tonight. 169. 169 communities. So there's an equity issue amongst our communities as well that we'll talk about tonight. When we look at equity and equality, we're talking about sameness versus fairness, and our students are not all the same. Interestingly, I will share with you that when I ask, and I I do school finance for kids as young as kindergarten through high school. When I ask kids which one is fair, when they just see this graphic without anything, they'll always choose equity. The interesting thing is for us as adults, we start making justifications. Why is the left one fair? How do we somehow get there? So we're going to talk about some of this in an equity framework. Question of why should we fund students based on their learning needs? Really, we look at this in 3 different ways. I'll start with students with disabilities. Students with disabilities are this broad span of kids, right? You can have a child who may need very short-term speech pathology. You may have a high needs, medically fragile child who needs a significant amount of support, and everything in between. There is no one average child with disabilities. So they have broad needs. Connecticut is one of 4 states that doesn't have a unique funding methodology for all of its special education kids. So right now we're in the company of Arkansas, West Virginia, and Rhode Island. So how we handle special ed in Connecticut is not how the rest of the country is experiencing special education. So we don't have an answer for that yet. English learners, these kids are the most amazing kids because they are mastering content at the same time they are mastering a new language, and I wish I could do that. But it costs a district more to educate a child who is learning both content and a new language. And students from a low-income family. These kids have simply had less experiences, and districts are often in a position of trying to provide them the same opportunities to get them caught up, right? And that takes more resources. So the question of does money matter? I'm just going to tell you, long story short, yes. It matters most, though, in urban communities. In communities with a significant socioeconomic challenge, but it matters significantly, and it matters not just for their outcomes like that year of testing, but it matters for their life. They earn more when we invest in our kids in schools. So equitable funding matters. It matters both in the classroom today and out of the classroom 5 years from now. So, before I go on, questions so far? Yes?
Question, do you have figures on the separation of federal funding by the 3 towns you had as opposed to donations or whatever else?
I can check for you. I'm not sure if we can extract that, but if we can, we'd be happy to. Yeah. Yes?
So the slide that you showed with regards to state funding, federal funding, county funding. So that state number includes obviously all state funding, which is excess cost, ECS, and maybe some other grants we get from the state. So one thing that I've always struggled with, local town officials have always struggled with, and it's a pain in the neck, is that slide itself where you see, and this has been going on for a decade or more, where your Fairfield, which we all think is very similar to us in regards to demographics, population, everything else, gets, in some instances, millions of dollars more, higher reimbursement rates, things like that. So, in ECS formulas, most complicated formulas, you don't get the same answer from anybody depending on who you're talking to. So, I'm assuming, are you going to break it?
I am going to break it down. It's not going to, I will tell you that breakdown won't answer all of your questions. So there's a few things. Number one, our website has an ECS tool where you can see each component, and so you can just go on there and dissect New Fairfield and dissect Brookfield and see every component and what it is. I'm going to tell you, though, that the problem isn't, we're in year 2 of a new education cost-sharing formula. So part of the challenge is we had years of no funding formula. In the state, we had abandoned a funding formula, and what we had done is then just use block grants. Those block grants were not connected to the number of students that you had, the needs of the students, what's going on with your tax base, all of those things. So after years of abandoning that, they have a 10-year phase-in on this new education cost sharing. And so it's taking time to equitize everything, to fix everything. And so that's why I'm sure you're close enough to Danbury to know that they're at, less than 13,000 per pupil. And, as they're using block grants that are the same year after year after year, and you have a skyrocketing student population, you end up with this huge gap. And it's going to take a while to get this new ECS formula to line up, to match where everybody is. So those experiences are real. It's just how do we fix those, right?
When you were saying that Connecticut is in the same situation as Arkansas, West Virginia, and Rhode Island, what was that again?
Special education. How do we fund our special education kids? And we will do a deep dive into special ed, yeah. But on the surface, in other states, there is some methodology, right? And it's different in different states, but, and so there's no magic answer. But all of them are looking at how do we take care of these kids in a way that is fair to kids, to schools, to communities, and with varying degrees of success. We're not quite there yet.
Okay, so you'll get to more of that.
Yep, definitely.
Broad question for you.
Sure.
So as you look at other states,
Yes.
Part of what we see in Connecticut is a lot of the funding is coming from property taxes in the local towns. In the cities, it's come a little bit more higher percentage coming from the state, which is an income tax-based funding source. How does Connecticut stack up on income tax versus property tax in terms of it being a funding source?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I'd be happy to have the team dig into that and give you an answer. I wouldn't be able to, but I will point out, here's a challenge too, just so that we frame this correctly. New England doesn't have a county system of government, right? Us, Massachusetts, these are all very hyper-local. When you leave New England, what you find is a community system of government, and that alone kind of spreads it out a little bit differently and shifts the burden in a way that is happening in Connecticut differently. So that's part of it too. When you have 169 communities, as opposed to, whether it's 8 counties or something else, there's an impact to that. So that's a piece of it. But I'd be happy to have the team look
I've
into it.
always felt that property tax as a funding mechanism is a bit regressive, and therefore it's pretty burdensome as you go down the income scale.
Yeah.
And I'm nervous about that for Connecticut.
So the question is about the reliance of property taxes. So interestingly, in 1977, we had a court case that said you could not rely on property taxes as a sole funding method for funding education, Horton versus Meskel. That happened in 1977. In 1988, the education cost sharing formula was introduced and has been tweaked over and over, but I hear you because I hear that feedback a lot, that it feels like going back to an over-reliance on property taxes as opposed to other methods. And of course you had the Great Recession in the middle of it, throwing off any strategic choices districts and communities and states were making. So I think that also threw a tad bit of a wrench in everything. So to understand what's happening in Brookfield, I think it's really important to talk about what's happening across the state. So across the state, we've seen a 10-year decline of 6.5% of school-age enrollment. So what's happening is it's not that these kids are just staying home, it's that there are less kids, right? This is happening nationally. There are some places that it's growing, but for the most part, it's a national trend. I will say I work in an office where, although the data people may check me on this and tell me my data is not quite right, I'm the outlier, and I think the average age is about 28. Very few of them have kids. So there's some choices that are happening that are causing a decline in enrollment. Over the past 10 years, Brookfield has experienced a decline of 268 kids. So pretty much aligning, right? But what we're also seeing is that while student numbers are declining, student need is increasing. So if we look at, let's see if I can. Essentially, and you've got the chart there, so we'll see how my memory does. But if you're looking at 2009 or so, and what I will tell you is that when we look at 2008, right at the cusp of that Great Recession, these numbers changed dramatically. And the biggest change is really up here to what we're measuring as low income, but it's free and reduced price lunch is currently how we count kids who are living in low socioeconomic situations. That didn't come down from the recession. And, you know, statistics right now say 1 in every 5 kids is going to bed hungry at night in Connecticut. So that's a major challenge, right? We're hovering at about 37% of our kids. This line here, this slow-growing red line, that's English learners. And again, as our country is changing, our state is changing, our communities are changing. And so that's a steady incline that's pretty predictable and understandable. And then this line is special education. And again, that has grown as well across the state. And, ooh. Okay, we can do this, y'all.
Correct it there. There you go.
Woo! We'll just recalibrate it every little while. So the percentage of free and reduced price lunch eligible children in Brookfield has increased 8 percentage points over the last 10 years. So 1 in every 10 kids is low income. If you pay attention to no other chart in this packet, and I will be happy, I have a sign-in up here, so if you'd like me to send you this packet, we also have it online. If you only pay attention to one chart, this is the chart to pay attention to. And what is good about it, and we can, again, if you're looking for more data, we'd be happy to do that for you. But what we're looking at here is not just the per pupil. And remember when I told you that we would catch up to the per pupil price that you're at currently, the net current expenditure per pupil? This is your accurate data, $15,635 per pupil. What matters in this is you also get to look at subgroup populations, free and reduced price lunch, English learning, and special education. It's easy to compare yourself to a community, but it's nice to really understand the underlying statistics and data behind it. So here you're at 15,635. The state average is 17,438. It's not a target, it's the state average. The range in Connecticut for per pupil spending ranges from, as you know, Danbury at the lowest at, I won't have their most current data, so I'm going to tell you roughly $12,800 per pupil, up to well over $35,000 per pupil. So the average is simply an average. But when you start looking at who are we measuring ourselves against? Who are we similar to, and what are they spending? You can see Bethel at $15,791 per pupil, Newtown at $17,789. If you go over to Sherman, Sherman's at $21,424. But you're also seeing their data here. They don't have numbers because that data is suppressed. Those numbers are so small that they can't release them. So this is a great chart to just orient you to what is going on in school finance. We're going to talk about state funding. And this is the question, right? What is going on in Brookfield, where Brookfield is getting 712, and specifically to your question, New Fairfield at 1,870. How do they decide? That's the question. So, first thing to know is that Connecticut has more than 10 funding formulas. It depends on the type of school. It depends where the school is located. But the biggest lion's share of it is education cost sharing, going back to that initial pie chart of 64%. Education cost sharing distributes more than $2 billion every year to public school districts. Okay, Jen. I will advocate all responsibility. Perfect. Okay. Go for it. You need to use the clicker on Jen now. So this goes back to that first piece, which is why do we have an education cost sharing formula? In 1977, in Horton versus Meskel, it was found that property wealthy towns really could spend more money with less effort than less property wealthy towns, which was stopping a child's constitutional right to a free education that was really equal, no matter where you were in this state. So we had this funding formula that was put in place 11 years later, and in theory, the education cost sharing grant is supposed to make up the difference between what a community can afford to pay for education and what is needed to fund the education of those students in that community. So based on the most recent data and the new funding formula, wait, Bill,
Sorry.
you got all excited.
No, that cursor's a little,
Okay, wait, now go back.
sorry, I know the cursor's like really sensitive over here, sorry.
Use the forward or back buttons.
Yeah, this one.
You got those?
All right, so
Yep, keep going.
back or,
Yep, forward,
okay.
forward. Here, don't go.
All right, I'm not touching.
So here's what's happening over the next 10 years in Brookfield. An education cost sharing formula was put into place 2 years ago. Last year was the first year of it. At that time, Brookfield was getting $1,145,095. This year you got $1,062,942. So this is going down. You're like, that doesn't look good, right? So now my job is to explain to you why that is. Okay. So we're going to talk about what goes into figuring out how much it would cost to educate kids in this community or in any community in Connecticut. And the first thing is the foundation amount. So the legislature says we need to set an amount for what does it cost to educate what I call your average bear. I have 4 kids. I have one that is an average bear. No unique educational needs at all, and she strives to just be in the middle of the pack so no one notices her. She's my average bear. And the legislature sets the foundation amount. For them, they set it at $11,525. It has been at $11,525 for many years. And when they redid the education cost sharing formula, they did not change that. So the challenge here is, I will tell you, 12 days of Christmas, right? When you listen to the Christmas music every year, suddenly like the DJ will come on and be like, this year to get 12 pipers piping and 11 drummers drumming, and if you bought all of the 12 days of Christmas, we know exactly how much it would cost and what it changes over time. There is no magic number with a foundation amount for what does it cost to educate an average bear. There just isn't. So it is left to each state to figure out what they believe is the right number. Our legislature has determined this is the right number. It is important to know there are special ed funding dollars that are built into this. When we look at it and what I would call reverse engineering it, and looking at us as compared to 50 states, we're in the second quartile. So we're low average, but we are in the average range. So that's where we are with the foundation amount. So the first thing is, this is what it costs to educate an average bear. First of all, how many kids do you have in your district? Because that number matters, right? And you start there. Go ahead. Next, what they've done is add some weights. And what they have said is, it does cost more to educate a child who is in a low socioeconomic household, economically disadvantaged. So we're going to add 30% to that $11,525 for kids who are living in low income as defined by free and reduced price lunch. Also, and this according to the legislature, and everybody can, there's a great question that I got the other day about why 75%. But at 75%, the legislature has said, if you have 75% of your kids or more living in low-income situations, that creates an extreme challenge for educators. And there will be an additional 5% weight only for the number above 75%. So not for all of the kids, but if you were at 76%, that 1% would get an additional 5% funding. There are only 3 communities in Connecticut currently that have concentrated poverty for student body. And then finally, English learners. Cost more to educate English learners, and therefore there's a weight of 15% for English learners. So this is what it looks like, and this is when you start seeing the difference, and this is just, remember, we're just talking about how much does it cost to educate kids. What they're saying is, you know what, an average bear is at $11,525, but if you have a child in a concentrated low-income community who is learning English, they need significantly more resources. So you can see how it plays out for low-income students. And what the state is saying is, you know what, if you have a low-income student, it's going to cost you almost $15,000 to educate that child, not $11,525, and so on. So now you know, right? We're going to take the number of kids in your district, and then we're going to break out those subgroups. English learners, how many kids are learning English here? How many kids are eligible for free and reduced price lunch? We've got that data, but now we need to talk about community equity, right? Going back to the purpose of Horton versus Meskel and those property wealthy communities. What can your community afford to pay? So the math behind that is looking at property wealth. How much can you raise in taxes? And income wealth. Doesn't matter if you can raise $2 billion in taxes if your community can't pay that, right? So the way we're looking at property wealth, and they use that at 70%, and they use the equalized net grand list per capita. And for income wealth at 30% ratio, they're using median household income. This is a change because this used to be based 90% on property wealth, 10% on median household income, which didn't really give an accurate reflector of what communities could afford to pay. So we now have this ratio. We do those numbers. Go ahead. And then what the state did with this new funding formula is say, we have an equity issue in Connecticut. So the state every year uses, the Office of Policy and Management measures community fiscal health, right, through the Public Investment Communities Index. This is a scale of 0 to 500. You don't want to score highly on this. The higher the score, the more economically distressed your community is. So what the state said is it seems like 300 on this scale of 0 to 500 is the tipping point. And at the time of the formula, we had 19 towns above 300 on the PIC index. Now we're up to 21. So what we're going to do is for those 5 highest, numerically speaking, PIC index towns, we're going to put our thumb basically on the base aid ratio calculator and provide an additional 6 percentage points and scale it all the way down so that it is kind of scaled in. Those new towns, I told you, we went from 19 to 21, stay right at the 3 percentage points. Okay, so we're going to stop there. So essentially, when you're talking about figuring out what a town can afford to pay, they're first saying, who's in the district? Who are your kids in your schools? What do they need? This would be the total cost to educate them. Okay, Brookfield, we've looked at your English learners, we've looked at your low-income kids, and we've said this is how much it costs to educate them based on our foundation amount of $11,525. And now we'll do the math and see what you can afford to pay and what we need to pay as a state. And you can disagree with the math, right? Because we all know there are communities that want to do more and communities that do less or are not able to do more. And so spending varies, but they're saying in order to meet the educational needs of the district, based on that 11,525 number, that's how we're going to calculate this. So that's how the state determines what you're going to pay and what the state is going to pay. We good so far? Cool. Okay, so there are still problems. We've got this new formula. We're in year 2. I will tell you we still have 11 funding formulas. 11 funding formulas matters, and the reason it matters is because at the end of the day, we're funding based on school type and not who's in the school, right? So education cost sharing is the only formula that looks at the weighted needs of students. What do they need? Who are they? Who are these kids? We're funding by school type. We're also funding by location. Who's running a school, where a school is located, what type of school it is, matters. And it's not kid-centric, right? Low income, how we count kids who are living in low income, currently done by free and reduced price lunch, is a problematic metric. And I think across the country we're working on a better solution. How do we accurately count kids who are living in low income? And then funding for special education, that whole other ball of wax, is not disentangled, which is problematic. So special ed, let's get to it. To contextualize, over the last 5 years, the number of special ed students in Connecticut's public schools has increased by 19.5%, which translates to a 2 percentage point increase year after year. If you look at the line, it's a pretty steady slope, right? But it's not an erratic slope. And what I will tell you is at the community level, we feel special education in a very different way that doesn't look like that line. We feel it erratically. We feel costs go up and down and shift significantly. So the question then is why? At the state level, special ed spending has been incredibly predictable. Again, not our experience. I will say this was an interesting statistic for me, and again, probably after that bar chart that I told you was my favorite and you should definitely pay attention to, this is an important slide because what it's telling you is that over the past 5 years, our total spending per pupil has increased by $1,811, while special education students, the cost to educate them has increased by $78 per pupil. So that's a very different data point than what I would say most of us would expect or experience. Special education spending by source looks a whole lot like a lot of these other charts, right? That big blue, 65% is local sources. That's you guys paying for the students in Brookfield. The state contributes about 29%, and federal dollars are 6%. This is interesting because what we see is that the contribution is relatively consistent, right? So all these sources are putting in about the same amount of money year over year. We have a data anomaly in 2016, and to the best of our ability, we actually do think it's just a data anomaly and not a student anomaly. The largest source of special education spending is the education cost sharing grant. That money is buried in that 11,525 foundation amount. It's not extracted. So when you look at it, 57% of special ed dollars come to the district from the state through education cost sharing, 18% through excess costs, which we'll touch on, and 25% of the state spending on special ed is through other state agencies. So here's the deal. The state is required to spend no less this year than they did the year prior on special education, right? So we're not going to see these numbers drop. At the federal level, they are required. So if you look at those three spending streams, portion of ECS, that's where they spend the most. Intermingled with your ECS dollars, we have almost $449 million of special education money. The excess cost grant is a capped fund. It's capped at slightly under $141 million and is utilized, and we'll touch on it after, but is utilized for students with extreme costs, those that are more than 4.5 times the average per pupil in the district. And then the other state agencies at $195 million, we really can't see behind that data. So, in 1995, the legislature said, you know, we've got this special line item for special education. We could just mush it all together. One fund delivery system. Let's just do that. At the time, they figured $911 they increased the foundation amount, $911 to cover special education. According to the State Department of Education, they just assume that roughly 20 to 25% of all education cost-sharing spending goes to special education. But again, this goes back to me saying initially, there's not a methodology for this, right? This is just kind of intermingled with your education cost-sharing district funding is special ed funding that the state says will get to those kids. We can go ahead. So excess cost. When a child has needs that cost the district more than 4.5 times the district average per pupil. So right now, your district average per pupil is that 15,000 plus number. At 4.5 times that number, the district is eligible to submit expenses for state reimbursement. Again, only those dollars, though, that are beyond the 4.5 times. And I told you before, it's a capped fund. So it doesn't reimburse a district fully. It reimburses a district and it varies year by year, but roughly 70 cents on the dollar. So even once you've exceeded 4.5 times your district per pupil average, you're still using your dollars to fund that. Excess cost grant accounted for 18% of all special education state spending. But let's talk about the, for lack of the better word, the district reference groups, right? Who are we most similar to? And I'm going to generalize for you, but Connecticut hasn't done district reference groups since 2006. These data points use that. But essentially, when you're looking at a district reference group, you're looking at those districts that are similar to you. And they're looking at, you know, all the indicators, whether it's school district size, and quite frankly, district wealth or lack of wealth, right? All of these things matter. A very broad oversimplification that I think happens probably too often is that you're going from wealthier districts to less wealthy districts. I will tell you, though, that this is also about district size. It doesn't mean that, I think that's a vast oversimplification of district reference groups. But I will say that you here are in district reference group B. What you're looking at here is, regardless of, I can tell you this is a more wealthy district and this is a less wealthy district. But when you look, spending is fairly similar across the board as a percentage of a district's education budget, right? It's not like down here they're paying, you know, 40% and up there they're paying 10% or vice versa. Go ahead. But what we also know is that wealthier districts do spend significantly more than less wealthy districts. So when you're in district reference group A, the average per pupil for special education is $35,331. When you slide down to here, you're looking at half that. There are a lot of reasons for that, and that's probably a whole separate conversation. There's no one simple answer. There are a lot, but you can definitely see the slide as you move down in district wealth to less costs. So what's going on in Brookfield? Well, when we look at Brookfield, you're looking at a growth of 70 students over the last 5 years that are special education students. And I want to just touch on that for a second because I think, like, for a lot of us, it's easy to think of student to student, right? Like a one-for-one trade. Like if we have 100 students that are graduating from 12th grade with special education needs and we were to get 100 kindergartners, that would be a very predictable exchange. It is not a very predictable exchange. So you can have the same number and vastly different needs. What you're looking at here is over time, over the last 5 years, you're looking at costs in the district from 6 million on special ed, 6.2 to 9.2. And these are also broken out by non-tuition expenditures, and I just want to point out when this data ends right now. That's important. But you're looking at two different costs per se, tuition expenditures and non-tuition expenditures. So why do we have a tuition expenditure? IDEA requires that students with special education needs are getting the same education whenever possible as a general bear, average bear, general education student. Sometimes the district is not equipped to meet the needs of a student, and the best way to meet those needs is to have somebody else support that child in a way that the district can be involved with, but it may not happen here. That's tuition expenditures. This is non-tuition expenditures, which is all of the supports that are going on for special education services right here in the district. So special education per pupil has increased for Brookfield over the past 5 years from $21,300 up to $26,425 per pupil. Which, when you look back to that slide that shows over time in Connecticut, there's this increase. So another way to look at this is, well, what percentage of the district's budget is it? So special education in 2017 was 22% of the budget, 78% of the budget was non-special education related. I'm going to stop it there for a minute. Questions on that piece? Are you starting to get the jet engine feeling of like, this is a lot of information, I'm so going to be texting her? For those of you who have seen this multiple times, it's like, okay, so we're going to keep going and we're going to talk about local funding. Local funding, that's $6.39 billion. You got this, Jen. All right. In Brookfield, when we're talking about local education dollars, we are talking about the $13,565. We talked a little bit about this. How your school district is figuring out what they need for money is by saying, this is what it's going to take to operate. This is what the federal government is giving us. This is what the state government is giving us. And this, Brookfield, is what we are left with for you to pay. I will say that for us, we see this conversation of budget as an ongoing conversation. A budget is a reflection of priorities in a district. And I will say boards of ed, superintendents, are doing their best to reflect what they hear, but if people show up once a year after the budget has been developed and just tell folks they got it wrong, it's not as productive as showing up during the year and saying, this is what really matters to us. This program matters. This is working. This isn't working. So that the budget can reflect your priorities as a community the first time, instead of them saying, we think we got it right, and hearing from you, boy, did you miss it. I do want to just say that district budgeting is a little unique. First of all, districts have fixed costs, much like the state has fixed costs, those costs that they can't get rid of. It's going to cost to have staff, it's going to cost to have heat, and it's going to cost to have lights, all of these things. So first, a district is looking at what's the growth in our fixed costs. For one thing, teachers. If you're doing salary increases, right? Human resources are the greatest asset and the greatest expense for a school district. So they're looking at what are our fixed costs? Where are they headed? What do we need to do? And then What's it gonna cost to maintain all of the other non-fixed costs? What would that look like? If we were to keep everything the same, we're gonna have some increases on whether it's heat or teacher contracts or whatever it is. After we've invested in that, what are we investing in? Those non-fixed costs, right? And what are the priorities of a district? The other thing I think is really important to point out is that school districts don't create a budget in the same environment that I would say, first of all, for us, right? We know when we're doing our household budget what our income is going to be. We know what that's going to be, when we're going to get paid. We know roughly what our expenses are, and we're making choices based on that. School districts are making choices in a slightly more, I would say, volatile environment. The first thing to point out is that school districts are creating a budget before the state budget is complete. So the first thing they're banking on is we're pretty sure they're going to do this. We hope they're going to do this. And we're going to guess there. We're going to guess things like special education. We know what it's cost. We know what our history is. But the challenge with budgeting for special education is you don't know who's coming into the district, nor do you know who's going to leave. So there is a bunch of school district budgeting that I would say is an anomaly for, I was a professor of nonprofit management for 16 years. The volatility in school district budgeting is unlike anything that I've experienced. So districts are trying to manage that and respond to that, give their best guesses. When I hear from somebody, hey, it seemed like a pretty quiet legislative session, what can I do? And I say, tell them to stick to the ECS formula. It matters, right? Because your district is banking on the fact that they're going to stick to the formula. Hearing from people that they need to, that your district is counting on that, it matters. So there's this environment of volatility that's going on, not just during the budget creation process, but then throughout the year as student demographics shift and this district has to constantly respond to changing needs. And you pay for this through your property taxes. Public schools are the biggest expense in every single municipal budget across Connecticut. This is the single greatest expense. Y'all have different amounts of property. This is where it gets interesting. This shows you some real wealth disparity in Connecticut, right? Grand lists across the state, from our wealthiest community to our least wealthy community. There is a $50 billion difference in property wealth. That's stunning. I've been doing some work in second town from the bottom, Scotland, with a very small population of 1,800 people. Did you even know there was a Scotland, Connecticut, y'all? See? Jen was all excited when I told her we were working in Scotland. She's like, really? We're going to Scotland? I was like, don't get excited. It's out in northeastern Connecticut. See their grand list? Grand list of 177 million. Their commercial property tax, they only have $343,000 worth of commercial property. Everything else is on the backs of residents. So even when you look at this, you're not looking at the full story, right? But you're looking at this incredibly broad breadth of, and again, going back to the base aid ratio, that 70% property wealth, we're looking there. Equalized net grand list per capita for Brookfield is, this is for fiscal year ending 2018. You're at 187,712, and you can see Bethel Newtown, Middlebury, Southbury, New Fairfield is lower. Sherman is an outlier in so many respects. Remember, they had the data that was suppressed on that chart as well, right? So you're looking at this range, but again, when you're using 70% property wealth to start looking at how much is the state going to contribute and how much are you as a community going to contribute, there's some pretty significant variances. And even though it's 14,000, you know, that difference for New Fairfield, as you pointed out, it's still a significant difference. And then we look at median household income. Here, you guys are pretty much dead even with New Fairfield, but again, this broad range of where things are. And this is 30% of your base aid ratio that we're looking at. Mill rates, right? What it comes down to with taxing, and to your point about property taxes and the regressiveness, you have mill rate variance in the state of Connecticut that is a range from the lowest to the highest of 62 points, almost 63. Hartford is slightly, there are some special and unique circumstances with Hartford's grand list, but a mill rate. If you look at Waterbury, that's very real at 60. And so what you're seeing are less economically healthy urban communities that are charging the most, and wealthier communities that are able to kind of do that same lift for a lot less effort. So in Brookfield, you're at 29, and New Fairfield 30, almost 31. With this range, kind of right in the middle there. So when you look at this, you're looking at what does that really feel like or look like when you look at this difference? Well, if you're in Hartford, you're paying $5,200 for taxes on a home. That's $200,000. In Greenwich, it would be $1,600. If you were to register a 2014 Civic, you're going from $53 to $203, which is, again, going back to your point about regressive property tax structures and the challenges in Connecticut, we feel that extremely. I'm just going to touch on this very quickly for you so you have a sense. You can flip to the next one. Magnet schools in Connecticut, 5 different formulas. Depends who's operating it. Is it a host district? Is it a regional education service center? So in this end of the world, it's Ed Advance, right? Or is Danbury running a magnet, or is Ed Advance running that magnet? In Danbury, it's Danbury. There's a different formula for each of those decisions. There's also a different formula for if it is in the Chef region. Are you all familiar with Chef? Yeah. So Chef desegregation requires a different type of lift. There's a different funding formula. And then Meriden, where I love Meriden, there's a magnet school in Meriden with its very own funding formula. So that tells you the challenges we have as a state, right? When I show these charts to kids, I told you I do this for kids grades like K through 12. I showed this to a bunch of 3rd grade boys. I was out at a literacy night. I had this map. They're like, what's the deal? They asked all the right questions. These 8-year-old kids. How come it goes to so many places? How come it's not the same for everything? If my friend goes to a different school, is he going to get different funding? Yes. That's not fair. And they're right. Keep going. So here you're seeing a host district magnet in the Chef region. And you're looking at a really complex affects funding flow, right? Non-chef. So I'm so glad I explained ECS and not these things. So I will tell you, charter schools have two different types of formulas. We have an agri-science formula, we have a technical school system formula, and we have open choice. How this plays out when we have all of these different magnet schools, tell you my kids went to a magnet school. My younger kids now go to a magnet school in Hartford, but my older kids went to a magnet school in Hartford for high school. They were there. It was run by Regional Education Service Center. The next year, it was run by Hartford Public Schools instead. As a parent, I walk in, it's the same building. A significant number of the teachers stayed, so I didn't see any shift with teachers. It was the same secretary in the office. We had a new principal and a new assistant principal, and nothing else changed. My kids had the same course opportunities. What I didn't know then was that funding changed. How messed up is that the same school where the same kids are going, they're all still the same kids. We changed funding because the principals and who's running the school system are different. So we're not equipping schools the same. And we're not equipping our kids the same as a result. So it does play out very acutely on the ground. You feel this. And finally, I will just tell you that what you can do, this is an ongoing and active discussion. Talk about it with other people. It sounds so cheesy, but I need to be honest with you. If it really matters to you and you don't tell other people this is something they need to pay attention to, this is significant dollars. These are our children in the state, and it gets lost in the shuffle, right? We all know about tolls. Very few people know about school finance. There's over 500,000 kids in Connecticut schools. So stay involved. Show up. Find your 5 and show up to meetings. Go out for pizza beforehand. Make it a fun thing. Assign somebody to go to the finance subcommittee meetings. You don't have to go to every meeting, but make it a point to create a team, to keep an eye on things, and to just say, we care. We're going to keep showing up. Host a workshop or a meeting. I do this. I'll sit and have coffee. You guys know this. For those of you who know me, I will have coffee or food any day of the week. So let me know. I live for that. And you guys have great places to eat here, so, as I've discovered. So if you want to learn more, let me know. We do this for free all the time. This is what I live for. It's really to get away from my kids. I send out, so if you sign up, I have a list where I'll put you on my list. I actually don't even share your name within my organization. No one but me and Jen are allowed to know who's on that list or have their contact information. I keep you posted with what's going on at the legislature. I will challenge you. I will also provide learning opportunities. Learning opportunities that are out there right now. They are looking at the legislature at changing the way we fund excess cost students for special education in Connecticut. There's some material on that in your packet, and if you'd like more information or want to talk about it, I am happy to. In full disclosure, several years ago, we came up with the main concept of a special education predictable cost cooperative that this cost model is based on. So I'm definitely biased in supporting it, but if you aren't, that's okay too. I told you we were non-political. The most important thing to me is to have the conversation, right? If we don't talk about it, even if we disagree, we're not going to fix things. So I am happy to listen and provide you information regardless of where you are. So just be active and let them know. Let them know when they got it right. Let them know when you wish something was different. Just don't show up just once a year. So with that, questions? Jet engine feeling? Okay, then I know I did my job, because if you were all like, no, that was easy, I would question. So I will tell you, feel free to sign up for our list, and we'll shoot you a confirmation email tomorrow. Don't feel pressured. I'm not going to track you down and be like, that person was there and didn't put their name on my list. But please, feel free to continue this dialogue with me. Thank you.
Does anybody have any lingering questions before we end?
Great job.
Well, thank you very much for
Oh,
attending.
thank you.
And we will, we'll post the presentation on the website. And if you have any questions, just contact either John or myself, or if you like the board people better, you can contact them. But we'll get you information. And
Thank you very much.
thank you for coming.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, my pleasure, thank you.